So before we jump into the webinar itself, just want a couple of pieces of housekeeping here. So the webinar is going to be recorded, and we will be sending it out to all registrants after we're done today. There will be a Q&A at the end, so please submit any questions that you have throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to get back to all of them. And just for those of you who are new to GoToWebinar, there should be a little button on your GoToWebinar console where you can enter in and type those questions at any time. So today, as I mentioned earlier, we will be talking through 5 ways to deliver exceptional customer support in a multi-channel world. So in doing so, we're going to talk through a couple of topics here. We'll be talking through the top channels that people use. We'll talk through best practices for each of these channels. And lastly, we're going to talk through how to leverage Front in order to support all of these channels. So just before we jump in, a little info on myself. So I'm Greg. I head up our customer success and our customer support team here at Front. I joined about 2 years ago, and prior to Front, I was leading sales teams at Dropbox.
Hi there, I'm Keiko, and I'm also going to be presenting today. I'm really excited to be here. I head up the marketing team at Front. Previously ran marketing teams at Eventbrite and Google with a focus on customer and product experiences. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. So you've probably all seen this stat before, especially if you're in the customer support space for a while, that 90% of customers turn to a competitor after a negative support experience. That's how important customer support is to businesses. And I guess I'm preaching to the choir here, but some brands really get it. Virgin CEO Richard Branson says, superior customer experience is the key ingredient to success in a competitive global economy. And these are some other iconic brands that are successful and well known for their customer service. So what's their secret? Well, what we try to do today is to break it down for you in 5 tips or ways you can deliver exceptional customer support, taking a page out of their books. So the first tip that we'll provide here is to make it easy for your customers to get help. As you can imagine, the world is changing very quickly. Just even thinking about how we use the internet or mobile phones today versus a few years ago, it makes you realize is that businesses really do need to adapt the way they support customers to meet those changes. A lot of research shows that phone and email are still the top ways for customers to reach out. But just in the last 3 years, the same research also says that phone and email has declined 7 to 8 points in usage. Whereas new channels like live chat, social media, SMS, and messaging have grown as businesses offer this option. So some of you might be familiar with these newer channels, but just in case you're not, let's take a closer look.
So one way to think about live chat is that it's the modern version of phone support. What you can see here on the slide is that this is our live chat module on our homepage of our website. So live chat is great for a couple of reasons. It's great for customers, but it's also great for you, the business. So customers like live chat because it's convenient. They don't need to pick up the phone or open their email in order to get in touch with you. They can get help right where they are on their website, sometimes even inside of your application. Forrester says that 44% of customers felt like having a live person answering their questions during the online purchase is one of the most important features that a website can offer. With live chat, there's no wait or holding time for an agent, and around half of people felt like live chat was the most effective way to communicate and get answers to their questions. So that's for the customers. Now let's talk about for your business. Live chat is a much more scalable way to do support for you. Instead of being able to take one person taking one call at a time, you can handle 2 to 3 people on a chat at any given time and be able to give effective support for all of them. So for you guys, live chat's a win-win for both you and your customers.
And similar to live chat, social media is convenient for customers. And honestly, it's really here to stay. And I'm going to make the case for that right now. There are over 1.5 billion people using Facebook, 300 million using Twitter. And all they need to do is open these apps on their phone and ask businesses a question. So that's super convenient for them. When we think about it, 1 in 3 people on social media prefer social media support over phone support. They also spend 20 to 40% more with businesses who offer great social support. 70% will share their positive experiences on social media, and people are also 3 times more likely to recommend your brand. But like I mentioned, social media is not going away. 9 in 10 businesses have said that they will offer social media support in the next 3 years. And in thinking about how you think about your cost structure, know that the cost of social media support costs 1/6 of phone support. So again, much like live chat, it's a win-win for you and your customers. But I would say that if there's one immediate thing a business can do right now to improve their customers' experience, is to provide better mobile support. You can see in the pie chart that one study showed that 63% of people use their phones a few times a month. And many of those people also reported a less than great mobile experience because businesses aren't adapting to consumer usage. People not only use mobile, but they also prefer mobile support. In a Harris survey, 64% of customers stated that they preferred SMS texting versus phone calls if they were given the choice. And 77% of millennials have a very positive perception of businesses that offer SMS for customer support. So we introduced a lot of new channels right now that you may or may not be using, but hopefully we gave you at least one reason that you should consider using these channels. And I can assure you that making it easy for customers to get the help they need will help you improve their experience. So with that, I want to move on to the second tip for today.
So when it comes to customer service, people have strong expectations. We just went through all the stats here. But no matter what channel they're reaching out on, they expect immediate, friendly, and helpful support. So the second way that we want to talk about offering exceptional customer support is to exceed your customers' expectations, not just meet them. So research shows that historically people want the fastest response times from phone. So on the phone, they expect to have immediate response. But when it comes to email, people are a little bit more forgiving. The majority of people are actually okay with the response within about half of a day for email. So now we have all these newer channels coming into the mix here, like social media, SMS, and live chat, and people expect a lot more. So when it comes to social media is not necessarily the first choice of customers reach out to a company, but it's actually rather a follow-up when they're not getting a response. You've seen all these cases of people tweeting at a company when they're upset with them for not getting a response or having a bad customer experience. But because this is a secondary means of communication, people's expectations is set around 2 hours. Meanwhile, for people who are using chat and SMS, they do this because it's convenient and they think it'll lead to faster and better results than phone. So keeping people waiting on SMS and chat for more than 30 seconds even can actually create frustration that wasn't there before. So now that we know what people are expecting from these different channels, let's talk through the best ways to interact with people for each of these channels.
So just starting out with best practices for any customer interaction, you want to make sure that the interaction is personal. You've heard this before, greet them using their name, show them that you care about them as a person, not just as a customer. You also want to use simple language. Whenever possible, use your customers' words to explain whatever help that they need. If your audience isn't very technical, then try not to be very technical, but also adjust to your user's level. If you suspect that it's a technical, more advanced user, then go ahead and use that. And finally, coming from a marketer, we care very much about brand. And I'd love to advocate for a moment here that even though you're in customer support, remember that you're a brand ambassador. So if your brand's funny or quirky, nerdy, or friendly, you want to make sure that the customer's experience matches what you stand for as a brand. So with that, let's dive in a little bit more specifically into best practices for handling each channel. So we use email a lot. So obviously we would imagine that we all know how to write great customer support emails. But if you think about it, when's the last time your colleague or a friend sent you an email telling you how much they want their money back or that you suck? And customers send those kinds of emails all the time. So when you think about customer emails, there's a need to sort of think about it differently. And I like to think about it like it's a letter that arrives in seconds instead of days. So when you think about that, when you think about it in those terms, you're able to be more thoughtful about how you reply instead of just your rapid fire response that you might exchange an email with a coworker. So again, first, thank them for their email, even if they are, yelling and screaming at you through the email itself. Because at the end of the day, they could have easily chosen not to contact you and not giving you that feedback and just simply gone to a competitor like we talked about earlier. Second, you're not a robot, so don't write like one. These are, again, very common sense things, but it's important to reiterate them because you want to make sure that you show your customers that you care about their problem. And the third tip here is leading with the bad news, then the good news. So, when you've discontinued a product or your customer wants their order faster and you know that it's just not possible, then you want to be able to provide some good alternatives, but you also want to lead with, a response to their original request first. And then lastly, just because email has no character limits, unlike some of the other channels we're going to talk about, it doesn't mean you actually have to include everything. It might actually even be overwhelming to some customers who get a long email. So if you're providing instructions, feel free to link to your Help Center article, or but if it's a shorter instructions, feel free to include that. So that's email, which is fairly straightforward. Now, switching gears here, let's talk a little bit about social media support, which can be a little bit more tricky. Like Greg had mentioned earlier, we often think of social media as the place where customers complain. But one thing to remember too is that as more younger customers are using social media regularly, it's also just becoming another way for them to reach out. So my first tip when dealing with social media support would be to not just assume that they're angry, but really try to figure out what their tone and intent is. Do they seem irritated, or are they just simply venting? Or are they actually looking for some help? And by taking that into account, you'll know what the right tone you should take in your response. The second tip with social media is to reply the way it came in. So if they tweet at you, you want to respond back with a tweet. If they direct message you, you want to send a direct message back. And remember that they tweeted at you for a reason, so resist the temptation to just quickly say, hey, email us at this number. If you can really just quickly resolve the issue right then and there, then go ahead and respond. But if you're trying to protect sensitive user information, you can feel free to move it to a more private method of communication like you see in the T-Mobile example. Third, make your responses concise. So I had mentioned earlier with email, no character limits. Obviously with social media, there are character limits, so you want to make sure to keep it short and sweet. You can also use URL shorteners or even splitting the tweets if you need to. And lastly, being mindful of what you say. Social media is public, as you guys all know, and remembering again that you're not just helping a customer, but you're also representing your brand. And customers will look at a brand's social media account and see how they treat customers before they make the decision to buy something or work with your company. So be very thoughtful in terms of how you respond. Now I'm going to move it over to Greg to share some tips on how to respond on live chat.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about live chat. So similar to phone, live chat is much more conversational, especially when when you compare it to email or even social media. So because of this, you can much more easily understand and adapt to the customer's tone and needs. There's a lot more back and forth when it comes to live chat. So let's talk through a couple of the tips for live chat. The first tip actually is not necessarily how your team handles live chat. It's actually around where you're going to offer it. So it's important to experiment where you're going to offer live chat on your site. So for example, you're going to want to offer immediate help on your website where you see the biggest points of confusions or opportunities. So examples are, do you get a lot of questions about your pricing? If so, maybe it makes sense to experiment with making live chat available on your pricing page. What about your features? Maybe you want to make it on your features page. Or what about questions around when they're checking out and buying your product? Maybe you should put one on the checkout page. So it's important to test and experiment where you're going to get the best lift and the best leverage for your customers in terms of where you put chat on your site. Now, be careful with this. So the reason why the experimentation is important, you want to avoid burdening your staff with putting chat inquiry pages on every single site on your, every single page on your site. You don't want to make it available everywhere necessarily. You want to make it where there's the most friction. Now, second, let's talk a little bit about how you're going to handle the chats internally. So as we mentioned earlier, customers want and expect to have wait times of less than 30 seconds when it comes to chat. So it's really important to make sure you have a plan of who's going to be staffing and monitoring chat. Similar to if you think about traditional, call centers or phones, phone centers, you need to have people ready and available to take the chats right when they come in. It's not like email, you can't just sit through a queue. So make sure you staff up your teams to the appropriate times when you're getting those volumes. Third, make sure that this is pretty simple, but it's always important to remember, which is make sure you're gathering that relevant information upfront on your customer. So things like information that you're going to need is things like their name, or take the time to actually understand exactly what their problem is. Don't just jump right to answering their initial question. Make sure you fully understand what they're asking. And then finally, it's really easy to fall into, I'll call it, fall into a trap of going back and forth with the customer, and neither of you are understanding each other. You can lose a lot when you're going over written communication. And so my last tip is know when it makes sense to jump on the phone with the customer as well. When do you switch to a different means of communication? And so by doing this and taking the time to call a customer when something is not being communicated properly, your customers are going to appreciate the extra care. So a little bit similar to live chat, let's talk about SMS. So SMS stands for short messaging service. So the key word here is short. So when you're texting, it's not necessarily appropriate to send long messages. So keep your messages short and simple. And similar to live chat, it helps you send messages faster so that your customers don't know that you've disappeared. Another tip when it comes to SMS, and you can actually apply this to a lot of your other services as well, but is to create automated text replies to common questions to reduce your workload. So if you have customers texting with the same questions over and over again, you can trigger automated responses, maybe with a link to a status page or information about an order, maybe about refunds. You can then trigger these responses to automatically go out. The third tip here is to be as proactive as you can and actually provide confirmations and updates before the customers ask about it. So anticipate the questions that you're going to get. So examples are when you know a delivery might be ready to go out, send them a text notification. If you use text, send them a text notifications and let them know that it's coming. Proactively let them know so that they don't have to then text you and ask, where is my order? And then the last tip here is a little bit different when it comes directly to your customer, but it's other ways that companies and our customers use SMS to make their overall customer service better. And this is for actually internal collaboration and internal coordination. So examples here are, we have a lot of customers and we see a lot of companies who have internal, let's say, they might be on-demand food delivery services or catering businesses or shopping services. And they have a lot of people internally who are shopping for their food, delivering their orders, and they need to use text message to communicate with these people. So using text message internally to coordinate with your internal employees or contractors will allow them to provide a better customer experience.
So we talked a lot about the importance of providing and responding to customers on more channels, but context switching between different channels can actually slow your team down. That's why the best teams who deliver exceptional support invest in technology that helps their teams. So let's talk about how you can be more productive while being everywhere your customers are. Supporting more channels could be problematic to an already overwhelmed team, but these new channels can also make your team even more efficient. For example, we talked about an agent only being able to answer one phone call at a time, but being able to manage several live chats at the same time. But if you don't use the right solution, you're eternally going to be jumping from tab to tab, screen to screen, like this example that we were showing here. And obviously we're biased because we work here at Front and we think Front is the best solution for handling multiple channels. But let us show you why we think that. At its core, Front is a shared inbox for teams. We built it on the idea that transparency, open communication, and collaboration helps teams get more done. And this is what Front looks like, kind of like an email inbox, and that's on purpose. We took the one tool that everyone knows how to use, which is email, and then built this new powerful solution from the ground up. And it allows you to connect all the different communication channels your team uses into Front and lets you organize them into shared inboxes so your entire team can access the messages and then respond to them within Front. There are several different channels that you can connect directly to Front, and these are the ones that are available out of the box, meaning you don't need to do any additional work to have them show up in your Front inbox. But you can also use channels not listed here with a little engineering work and manage your messages in Front using our API. But to make this all kind of make more sense and to make it more concrete for those of you who've never seen or used Front, we're going to walk through how each of these channels look and work in Front. So starting with the most basic, email. You have customers that email support at or team at, contact at, and these different aliases. And these emails can all be funneled into a shared inbox instead of a copy being sent and blasted out to everyone's inbox. So in this image, they're sent into the support inbox that you see on the left-hand side. There's actually only one copy of the email that everyone has access to, and that email then can be assigned to be handled by an agent, in this case, me, and everyone can see that in the upper right-hand corner. There's no confusion then about who's responsible for what the status of the message is, which is what you're seeing in the middle column there. It is currently open because it's assigned to me, but it's not unassigned or all. And you'll notice in the reply, it just looks like you're personally emailing customers. So super easy, what you would expect in an email experience, but a lot more efficient. So now let's look at what social media looks like in Front. So you see that it comes, social media messages, when they're connected to Front, it comes into the inbox called, you see it on the left-hand side in the left panel called @FrontAt, and that's our Twitter account. Then what you see in the right-hand side is from Thomas Frank, a tweet at Front, and Corey, who's on our team, has responded to his tweet. And you can tell that if you remember from the previous screen, it kind of just looks just like an email where you can hit reply and create your message right there. But instead of it sending, when you click send instead of an email, it just shows up on Twitter. So this exact conversation that we had and handled in Front, this is what it looks like on Twitter. We barely switch context going from email to responding to a tweet. You know, the interface is very similar for your agents to be able to switch between these two channels. And we also don't have to monitor our Twitter feed, because all of the messages are being funneled into Front automatically and then reposted back to the original way that the customer had reached out to us.
So talking a little bit about how we can support our website visitors within Front. This is talking specifically about live chat. So what you can see in the image here is our live chat inbox in Front. We've called this inbox website visitors so that all messages that come from our website are going to flow into this inbox here. So you can see that a customer has written out and they asked us a couple of questions about how to manage social media on Front, and we're able to respond directly from Front. Now, similar to the other channels that we've already spoken about, you can respond directly in Front, but the cool thing about this is that it actually looks seamless, like you're actually using a third-party chat console to be able to come directly back into the customer's chat console on your website. So similar to that, let's talk about SMS. So we have an SMS inbox linked to Front here. So the highlighted rectangle on the left, you can see there. The customer writes in and just says, hello there, this looks really cool. And we're able to, again, respond directly from Front, and Keiko says, thanks, let me know if you have any questions. And we're able to text it right back to our customer and it shows up right on their phone. So again, very similar to the other services where it shows up right in whatever means that they were writing you from. So now thinking through all of these different channels that we've talked about, one of the important things that we hold really dear here is the idea of switching between tools internally really can actually increase your workload. This context switching of switching back and forth between all the different tools that you would typically need to manage separately without a tool like Front, really can be a big burden on your team. So reducing the number of new technology that your team needs to learn can really boost your team's productivity. So regardless of whether or not you're using Front, it's really important to think through choosing a solution that helps you reduce that context switching so that they can maintain focus throughout the day.
Now, moving on to our fourth tip, I think I want to make sure to frame this as the fact that I think we'd all agree that our employees need to work together more today than probably ever before. Products are becoming more complex, people are becoming more specialized, information is getting more and more siloed within different tools and departments. And so it's no longer possible for just customer support agents to know all the answers. And that's why our fourth tip is to leverage technology that enables easy internal collaboration. As our Zappos' famous CEO said, customer service shouldn't just be a department, it should be the entire company. And as we've mentioned before at Front, we believe this. We believe that customer support should really be part of everyone's job. And so I want to show you what we mean and how we've built a product that enables that. So one of the reasons businesses turn to Front is because they want more visibility into who's doing what. By making every message assignable to someone, as you can see here on the screen, that gives the clarity necessary for everyone else to know how they can help. It makes it clear who's accountable for responding, and that transparency of everyone being able to see assigned messages enables a greater trust, communication, and collaboration within the team. Now I'm going to turn it over to Greg to talk a little bit more about what you would imagine traditional collaboration to look like in Front.
So one of my, I'll say, similar to assignments inside of Front, I view collaboration as one of the core and distinctive features of our product that, and actually personally was one of the reasons why I joined the company. I think this is probably one of the coolest things we have. You know, let's think through a scenario where you get an email and you need help from a teammate internally in order to respond from this customer. So I had many examples, but an example today is that somebody on the success team has a question for me about how they respond to a particular customer. Maybe it's, you know, hey, what was the price of you know, our legacy pricing from 2 months ago? Or in my examples at Dropbox, I had, you know, reps on my sales team would forward me an email from a customer that would say, you know, hey, like we want to do it for X pricing, but we want you to do on-site training. And these are questions that you need collaboration internally to do. So without a tool like Front, how do you do that today? How is this collaboration done? So you're probably either sending them a Google chat message or maybe a Slack message internally and saying, hey, can you help me with this? This is what they said. Can you help me, right? So that creates a lot of work for both sides because you have to re-explain the context and then you have to basically copy and paste an email into a message and send it that way. Or another way that it's done today, you know, prior to using something like Front, is that you have to carefully remove the customer from the thread and then forward or reply to that thread and then add the teammates internally that you want to have manage it. Now, by doing this clogs up everyone's inboxes, creates duplicate copies of messages, and creates more work for everyone. So with Front, and you can see in the screen here, you can actually directly @mention teammates internally in order to share a copy of the message with them. So by doing this, and you can see in the examples here on the left-hand side, Mike mentions Kalen and brings, Kalen is Mike's manager, and Mike brings Kalen into this example here, and Kalen can now immediately then go and see the context of the message, and they can have an internal conversation about how to respond to this person's message here. So by doing this, you have record of the conversation, you're given the context immediately, and with your whole team on Front, the important thing to note is that it's not just your customer service team that you're going to be able to collaborate with. It's anyone in the company. Sometimes we have questions for marketing. Sometimes we have questions for engineer, and you can bring in anyone, you know, from your organization in order to collaborate on Front. So moving on to the next level of collaboration here, very similar to needing to grab a teammate in order to respond to a message and, you know, have them help you. You can actually take it a step further and actually work on a shared draft with your colleague here. So again, in that example I talked through about, you know, one of actually my sales reps at Dropbox who would forward me an email from a customer and say, hey, they said X, Y, and Z. This is what I'm thinking about saying. That would all happen in a forwarded message or a Google message. With Front, they can actually share the conversation with me by @mentioning it. They can start drafting up a message in a reply, and then they can share that draft directly with me. That allows me to be able to see exactly what they're intending to write. Then I can then go and make edits or make comments to the actual draft that they've written. They can then change it and add whatever they want, to it from there, and then they can send it directly from the customer. So by doing this, you're allowing true collaboration around the emails that you're sending to your customer to make sure that you're giving the customer the best answer that they should get.
So this is our final stretch here in our 5th tip, which is that to automate, analyze, and optimize. So what we mean is that in a more complex multi-channel world, it's important, it is super critical that your tools take as much of the burden off of your team, because you need to respond faster in more places and, like we mentioned, friendlier than ever. So when you're juggling multiple channels, you want to be able to automate as much as you can, analyze those results, and continue to optimize your workflow. Since there's no one best solution for every company, it's important to try different solutions and see what works for you. But let's break down how automation specifically can help your team deliver better service. Your team's time is precious and finite. You don't want to be wasting it on repetitive manual work, because actually that's the time that you want to be spending on personalizing your support to customers. So first, we want everyone to think about what type of repetitive work you do today. And most companies will be quick to say that they're writing the same responses over and over to questions that are frequently asked by customers. And that's where canned responses or macros can save tremendous time. I would imagine that most if not all of you are taking advantage of this type of feature already. I'm showing a sample here that we use at Front, and you basically create a template or response to a question, then when you receive that question, you can insert it as your response, and then just spend that a little bit of extra time to personalize it to each customer. For some of these repetitive activities and tasks that you do, you can also completely automate it with rules. So what I'm showing here is a rule that uses an if this, then that type logic to automate tasks in Front. The rule that I've set up here is a message that comes to our support. If a message comes to our support inbox, then assign it to people randomly or on a round robin basis to these following team members. This way, as a supervisor, I don't have to stop what I'm doing every time a new message comes in and assign it to my team members. It also makes sure that team members are not able to just jump into inboxes and cherry pick the ones that they want to respond to and leave the more complicated, difficult ones behind. And as I mentioned earlier with assignments, it ensures that every message has a clear owner, which is the first step in making sure that the customer's request or question will be resolved. And just to give an example here, it's fairly typical for many of our customers to have upwards of 70+ rules in Front. And that would include everything from sorting emails into the right folders to keep messages organized, to even just automatically tagging and categorizing messages to make reporting easier. So it doesn't have to, the rules and the automation that you do doesn't necessarily have to be your communication back to customers, but it could also be all the manual tasks that you do behind the scenes to make sure that your workflows are optimized.
So let's take this a step further and talk about how you can use rules in order to set and enforce your SLAs internally. So a lot of companies either have internal SLAs, or basically this is going to be committed response times that they want to have for their customers, or they have external SLAs, meaning that they've promised their customers that they're going to get back to them in a certain amount of time. So it's probably, especially if you promised it externally, it's pretty important to make sure that you meet those. So in general, and then I'm going to hammer down these tips here and these stats here, but what do your customers expect when they reach out to you? Again, you have the opportunity to use these SLA rules in order to enforce and meet and exceed these expectations for half a day for email response times, 2 hours social media response times, and chat and SMS response within 30 seconds. So what you can see on the screen here is an example of a rule that we built in Front that basically says, and this is for the email channel, so when you get an inbound email into our support tier 1 channel, and the email has been unreplied after 2 hours, we want to notify our team that, hey, like, we're breaching our SLA, we need to do something about it. So what it's going to do is it's going to notify myself and Keiko inside of Front, and it's also going to notify us in our internal tech support channel in Slack that our whole team monitors, so that somebody, whether myself or Keiko or someone on our team, is able to get back to the customer as soon as we possibly can. So these are kind of fail-safes that you can put in place to make sure that you are meeting the expectations that you set for either yourselves or for your customers. So once you actually set your SLAs, you're going to want to check in to see, using data to see how you're doing here. So you can see on the screen here, there's a couple of charts here that from our analytics dashboard, but kind of looking at it at a little bit more of a high-level basis. You can use our exports and our reports to actually analyze how fast your team is responding to customers as a whole or by channel, how long it's taking to resolve inquiries, how individuals on your team are performing. You might want to see if certain individuals on your team are taking high volume with quick response times, high volume with slow response times, how many messages it takes to go back and forth for that rep to resolve an issue with the customer. You can almost infer efficiency by stats like this. You can also try to use analytics to figure out any trends in the types of inquiries you're getting using tags inside of front. So every business is going to be different. So in order to deliver exceptional customer support for your business means that trying different channels, using different SLAs, and basically figuring out what's going to work the best for you. So as you make these changes, it's important to see how it impacts the metrics and seek new areas for improvement.
So this is the end of the road here, folks. I want to go ahead and just wrap us up and recap what we learned today in terms of the 5 ways to deliver exceptional customer service. So the first one was to make it easy for your customers to reach you. That means being where your customers are, whether that's live chat, social media, and even considering SMS as an option. The second one was exceeding your customers' expectation for each channel. Now that you know what to expect, you can customize your approach to those channels. And thirdly, reducing context switching when supporting multiple channels. So find a tool like Front that can help you manage more with less tools and less of a learning curve. Fourth was to enable easy internal collaboration to move faster. Understand that your entire company, not just your support team, needs to participate in customer experiences, and make sure you make the necessary investment to make that a reality. And then lastly, automate, optimize, and analyze your workflow and performance. You want to minimize time wasted on repetitive tasks through automation, and then make sure that you're spending the right amount of time to improve your customers' experiences. So that's all the content we have for today. Well, hopefully this was really worth your time. Thank you for sticking it out with us here to the very end. If you have any other questions, you can email us at team@frontapp.com or any of the different channels that we shared with you today. And we look forward to hearing from you guys soon. So thanks again for coming to the webinar.
Thanks, everyone.